Welcome back. It's good to have you here, in this quiet space we keep just for ourselves, where the day softens, the voices fade, and the lights grow low. Maybe you've settled into a comfortable corner now, tucked beneath the warmth of a familiar blanket, the weight of the world just distant enough to loosen its hold. The room is still, and your breath begins to slow, like the gentle winding down of a procession at dusk. Tonight, we'll drift toward a name you know well, a name etched in statues, in speeches, in centuries of echoes, Julius Caesar. But this isn't a story of glory. This isn't a tale of triumph and laurel wreaths. This is something softer. A quiet walk behind the silk curtains of power, where no one sees the weight a crown can leave when it's never actually worn, only chased. You won't be a soldier tonight. You won't hold a sword or march across Gaul or ride through the streets as crowds shout your name. No, tonight you will simply feel what it was to be him from the inside. A man surrounded by voices, never truly alone, and yet never truly safe. A man who could read the stars, but never quite trust the eyes that stared back at him. So let your shoulders fall, let your hands rest where they are, and allow your thoughts to drift, not toward battle, but toward marble halls lit only by oil lamps, toward the cool air of a Roman morning before the city has woken, when the echo of sandals on stone is the only sound, and the weight of command presses not on your shoulders, but somewhere quieter, somewhere inside your chest. This is not a rise, it is not a fall, it's a life, and one you may not envy once you see how power, even in its most glittering form, can harden like stone beneath your feet. So dim the light a little further, breathe as slowly as the sky fades, and let us step gently into the world of Caesar. Not the legend, but the man. Chapter 1, The Boy in the Shadows. You are not yet Caesar. Not yet the voice that thunders from the Senate steps, not the face carved into marble or cast into coin, not the man who will one day stand at the edge of the Rubicon and change the fate of a republic with a single crossing. No, for now, you are only Gaius. A boy. Just that. The rest of your name still sits too heavily on your shoulders. Julius Caesar. A name that tastes like ambition when spoken aloud, though your voice is still too soft to carry it. You are born into old blood. Patrician blood. The kind that used to mean something when Rome was younger and less dangerous. Your ancestors once stood beside kings and gods, or so the stories say. You're told your family descends from Venus herself, a lineage traced through Aeneas, through Troy, through myth and smoke in golden threads. But that divine heritage does not fill the pantry. It does not repair the cracks in the walls. It does not ease the silence that sits in your mother's gaze when the debts come due. Your house is respected, but only just. There are families with more land now, more coin, more influence. You hear their names spoken more loudly in the forum, see their litters carried with more polish through the muddy streets. You live among shadows of former glory, and you grow into your awareness slowly. Through overheard conversations, through the tightening of your mother's mouth when guests arrive, through the careful tone your tutor uses when he says, "Your family has honor, but few allies." The days unfold quietly in your childhood home. The walls are lined with fading frescoes, the tiles worn smooth beneath your feet. You know every creaking board, every change in the light through the shuttered windows, the hour when the olive oil lamp must be trimmed, the moment your mother leaves her sewing to stand silently at the altar of the household gods. She prays often, but you've never seen her cry. She teaches you to sit straight, to speak when spoken to know when not to speak at all. You learn the delicate art of presence, of being seen, but not too much. She says, "Power is not always loud." And you believe her. Your father, you remember him dimly. A tall man with a voice like low thunder, who rode horses with pride and smelled of dust and laurel. But he is gone before his shadow has settled into the walls. Fever, they say, or weakness. You aren't told much. Your mother doesn't speak his name often. When she does, it is always in the past tense. There is no time for mourning. Rome does not stop moving for grief. You attend lessons with your cousins and neighboring sons, though your eyes wander more than they should. You study rhetoric and the law. You memorize the 12 tables and the verses of Ennius. You read Cicero's oratory before you fully understand the stakes of his words. And when others rush through their declamations for praise, you slow down, not to be noticed, but because you want to feel how the words sit in the mouth. You begin to realize that language is not just for beauty. It's for survival. There are days you walk with your tutor down the streets of the Suburra, the more chaotic district where smells tangle and voices spill from every doorway. There, among the crowded markets and shouting fishmongers, you learn something your scrolls will never teach. That Rome is not clean, not polished, not marble white. It is cracked and crowded and filled with heat and hunger. It is loud, too loud for thinking, and yet in that noise, you begin to listen. You hear which names draw laughter, which ones draw fear. You begin to sense the pulse of the city, beneath your sandals, beneath your ribs. Rome moves. It is never still. It watches everyone, especially those who think it isn't watching. And then Sulla comes. He arrives like a winter storm, sudden, sharp, and without pity. The Republic begins to tear at itself. Consul turns on consul, tribune on senator. Lists go up in the forum, names scratched onto wooden boards, names of enemies, names of those to be struck down. One day, you hear your uncle's name on the list. Marius, the man your mother once called a hero, the man who had grown too powerful, too defiant, the man whose blood now stains your own. Suddenly, your family name is not armor, it is danger. Your home changes overnight, doors are barred, servants disappear. Your mother no longer prays aloud. When men knock at the gate, no one moves to answer. They come for you eventually, or nearly do. A demand arrives, surrender yourself. Bend the knee, join Sulla's ranks, or suffer the same fate as the others who clung to Marius's memory. Your mother refuses, quietly, absolutely. She does not weep even then. And so you flee. You are just 16. You leave Rome not in a triumphal procession, not in the shining light of morning, but in the blue hush before dawn, cloaked, quiet, with your mother's kiss still warm on your forehead and a sack of borrowed coin clutched beneath your robe. You walk fast, you do not look back. Rome is no longer your home. It is your hunter. The years that follow are gray at the edges. You hide in hills and towns that forget your name. You change your clothes, your company, your posture. You learn how to sleep lightly, how to carry yourself like a man too unimportant to kill. But you do not break. You bend, perhaps, but you do not break. You begin writing letters again, short, careful, unsigned. You ask questions. Who has fallen? Who has risen? Which names are safe to speak again? And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tide shifts. Sulla, that storm of a man, begins to age. His voice thins, his hands tremble, he steps down, and one day without ceremony, he is gone. Rome breathes. So do you. You return as quietly as you left. No trumpets, no banners, just the quiet tread of a boy now grown. Your cloak is heavier, your face is sharper, but your eyes are the same, they still watch everything. You walk once more down the streets of your youth, and they feel smaller now. But the city is watching you too. Some whisper your name again, some smile, some stare, some remember the name Caesar as a relic. Others begin to suspect it may rise again. You keep your voice low, your steps measured. You do not yet chase office or glory, you simply wait. You observe. You learn who filled the voids left by the purges, who paid for safety, who owes. You are not a soldier yet, not a consul, not a dictator. But Rome, like you, remembers, and one day, your moment will come. But for now you remain in the shadows, not because you are weak, but because you are patient. And even patience in Rome is a kind of power. Chapter 2, a name, but no protection. You've returned to the city that nearly swallowed you, but you do not return in celebration. You come home like a shadow slipping back beneath the threshold, unnoticed by the crowds, unannounced to the public squares. There are no triumphs waiting, no arms outstretched, only a city that has forgotten how young you were when you were last here, and how carefully you learned to survive it. Rome feels familiar and unfamiliar, like a room you once lived in that has since been painted over. The hills are the same. The gods still watch from their marble alcoves. The noise of the market still drifts up in the morning like wood smoke. But the faces are different. So many faces. Replaced, removed, remembered only in whispers. Your mother is waiting, still upright, still watchful, still more granite than flesh. And though her arms wrap briefly around your shoulders, it's her silence that says more than any embrace. You have survived. She will never say she feared you wouldn't, but her hands linger just a moment longer than before. You are older now, taller, the curve of your back straighter. Your voice carries weight when you speak, though you use it sparingly. There is still food at your family's table, though you know it is often earned through careful politeness and long conversations you are not invited to overhear. You begin attending more public gatherings, forums, speeches, gatherings of men who carry influence on their shoulders like armor. You listen more than you speak. And when you do speak, you choose your words like a craftsman choosing which edge to sharpen. But the name still follows you. Julius Caesar. Not yet the legend, only the risk. You learn early that your name brings raised eyebrows in some quarters and furrowed brows in others. You're a Julian, yes. Descended from Aeneas, from Venus herself if the stories are to be believed. But those divine stories carry no weight against the very human fears of your uncle Marius's ghost. There are still men in Rome who flinch at the memory of his policies, who recall his reforms with a mix of disgust and dread. And they see you, young, poised, sharp, and they do not smile when they say your name. You are offered positions, but they are traps in disguise, quiet roles, decorative titles, harmless posts far from Rome, places where men are sent to be forgotten. You decline them with care. You're not ready to step forward. Not yet, but you will not be dismissed. And so you walk carefully, not just through the city, but through the conversations, through the dining rooms, through the labyrinth of favor and disfavor that defines Roman power. Every nod carries weight. Every silence is a blade tucked beneath a robe. You marry Cornelia. She is young, intelligent, and the daughter of Cinna, another name stained with memory. Her lineage makes the optimates nervous. Your refusal to divorce her when the new regime demands it marks you as defiant, even dangerous. You are stripped of your priesthood. Your wealth is frozen. You are left not destitute but deliberately exposed, no longer protected by status, and yet still too notable to be ignored entirely. And this is when the name becomes both shield and knife, because you begin to realize that survival now depends not on obedience, but on subtle defiance, not on disappearing, but on learning how to endure under watchful eyes. Rome has always been a city of masks, and now you begin to learn how to wear one. You take a post in the military, reluctantly offered, grudgingly accepted. Not a command, not a triumph, but a proving ground. You are sent east to Asia, to fight for a republic that does not yet know whether it wants you. And there, away from the marble corridors and whispering halls of Rome, you learn something new. You learn how to lead. The battlefield teaches in ways the classroom never could. You command with calm. You listen more than you speak. You study terrain like you once studied faces, carefully, deeply, knowing that each shift may be the one that saves you. You are decorated for bravery, not extravagantly but undeniably. A crown of oak leaves worn in silence. You refuse to brag. You let the silence speak for you. But even there, even miles from home, the name lingers. Men speak it in tents and around fires, some with reverence, some with unease, and you begin to feel its weight more keenly. It is no longer just your inheritance, it is your shadow. When you return to Rome, you do so quietly, You do not announce yourself with parades or politics. You return to observe, to listen, to read the mood of the city like a physician reading a pulse. And what you find is unrest. Sulla is gone, but his legacy is not. The Senate is brittle. The streets are restless. There are too many poor and too few answers. Bread is scarce. Violence is common. And yet, in the villas of the elite, laughter still rises over polished banquets, and names are still traded like currency. You begin to give speeches, soft at first, then firmer. Not angry, not wild, but piercing. Your words land like pebbles in still water, small at first but widening in their ripples. The people begin to listen, not just to your words, but to your silences. You say little, and yet they begin to believe you are saying what no one else dares. And this is when you learn the most dangerous thing in Rome is not a sword, it is expectation. People begin to expect you to speak, to rise, to fight, and you are not yet ready. You are still learning, still shaping, still watching. But the name, it does not wait. The Julian name, once your risk, now becomes a magnet. Those who once feared you begin to align themselves with you, not because they love you, but because they fear where power might tip next. And suddenly, you find yourself in the middle, not protected, not secure, just known. You walk the forum and feel the eyes turn. You sit at banquets and notice conversations fall still when you raise your cup. You begin to understand that power is not granted, it accumulates, slowly, like dust on a statue. You may not see it at first, but others do. They wipe it away, or try to. You haven't declared anything yet, haven't rebelled, haven't crossed any lines, but already some see you as a threat, and so you learn to live like a flame inside glass, visible but contained. You are still the boy in the shadows in many ways, still the quiet observer, but now you are also something else, a question Rome has begun to ask itself, and that is why your name, even now, cannot protect you. Because when people stop fearing your silence, they begin to fear what it might become. Chapter 3. The Laurel and the Chain. You never asked for applause, not really. But when it arrives, slow at first, cautious, like the patter of distant rain on marble steps, you do not shy away from it either. You let it settle, let it wash over you, not because it brings joy exactly, but because it brings confirmation. You have spent so long slipping through Rome's corridors unnoticed or doubted that when they begin to recognize your name again, not as a threat, but as a possibility, something in you goes still. This is what ascent feels like. Not thunder, not fire, but a steady accumulation. A quiet weight building around your shoulders with every new title, every carefully chosen speech, every night you spend drafting letters instead of sleeping. You begin to understand that power, in Rome, is less a victory than it is a burden you carry, like a borrowed robe. Too large at first, too ornate, but slowly fitting to the curve of your back. You are elected military tribune first, a modest role, almost ceremonial. But you use it as a doorway. You observe the legions, not the glory, but the details. How food is distributed, how commands are given, how the men speak when they think no one is listening. You learn that loyalty is not won with speeches. It is built in silences, in how you stand beside them when rain slicks the earth, in whether you eat the same bread or ask for better. Then, years later, you run for Eyides, and you win. It is a public role, flamboyant if you let it be. Your job is to manage games and buildings and public services. Bread, circuses, you know what they expect of you. Distractions, pageantry, a little dust to be kicked into the eyes of a restless populace, and you give it to them, not reluctantly but precisely. You spend more than you have. Lavish spectacles, gladiators, processions, feasts. You bring beauty to the forum. You bring food when others hoard it. People chant your name now, not with suspicion, but with warmth, with memory. Gaius Julius Caesar. You become a figure again, not myth, not hero, but man. A man who remembers what it means to walk among them. But every coin spent is a debt, and every debt is a chain. You borrow, yes, but not foolishly. You borrow from men who expect you to rise. And with each loan, each quiet promise exchanged under torchlight, you feel the golden threads begin to wrap around you. Soft at first, barely noticeable, but you know how easily soft things can become ropes. The city praises you, but it does not yet lift you. So you press onward. Next, you seek the office of Pontifex Maximus, the high priest. Not a military post, not a consulship, but a role that touches the sacred. You are still young for it. The odds are not in your favor. Your opponents are older, wealthier, more entrenched. But you campaign anyway. You walk the streets until your sandals split at the soles. You speak in hushed courtyards and beneath ivy-covered balconies. You smile, always with intention. You ask questions before offering answers, and the people begin to respond not just to your gifts, but to the space you leave for them to feel heard. When the vote is cast, you win. Not by a narrow margin, decisively. Your enemies whisper in disbelief, in warning. They say you've gone too far, too fast, but you do not rush forward. You hold still. You let the robe of the high priest settle around your shoulders like mist. You live now in a house just beside the forum, its steps worn smooth by centuries of those who tried to use the gods as leverage. But you do not speak for the gods. You barely even pray. You speak for yourself now. Still, you do not sleep easily, even with titles, even with cheers, because now, at the edge of each night, when the oil lamps burn low and the ink dries on another scroll, you feel it, the subtle tightening of the net. With each office comes visibility. With each step upward, the ledge narrows. You are climbing, yes, but there are fewer places to place your feet now, and more eyes watching. You lie in your bed, the wool blanket pulled high to your chest, and you stare at the beams in the ceiling. Sometimes you trace old memories. The shape of your mother's hands, the way the light moved in your childhood bedroom when it slipped through slatted shutters. You wonder if any of the great men of history ever slept well. Then you rise early. You answer letters, you write new ones. You speak in the Senate, and you choose your tone carefully, never too loud, never too passive. You offer reforms, yes, but gently. Bread distribution. Land for veterans. Nothing that draws the knife, but enough to earn applause. You say you are preserving the republic, even as the shape of it begins to shift beneath your hands. Some support you now, others tolerate you. Still others, the old guard, the ones who cling to names long dead, see your ambition and grow afraid. You hear your name in their speeches, wrapped in suspicion, dipped in irony. Caesar, they say, as though it's already a crown. But you remain calm. You run for praetor next, a powerful magistrate, one step below the consulship. You win, again. And still your debts grow. You owe favors now, real ones, heavy ones, the kind that cannot be paid in coin alone. You attend dinners where every toast is a veiled question. You shake hands that feel more like deals than greetings. And still, you smile, because you know this is the path, and there is no turning back. There is a moment one evening when you return late to your house. The streets are quiet, the torches on your door have gone cold. You pass through the vestibule without a word, your sandals tracking dust onto the mosaic floor. You pause before your study, the door still slightly ajar, and you look inside. There on the table lies a folded piece of parchment. It is not addressed. You open it. It contains only 4 words. Too much, too fast. You do not know who left it, or perhaps you do. Perhaps the name rises in your mind but never reaches your lips. You place the note in the hearth. Watch the corners curl, catch, vanish into quiet ash. Because you understand, this is what happens when you begin to matter. Every laurel they place on your brow is another weight. Every title is another vow you must keep. And the higher you rise, the more they wonder what you might become. And you wonder too. Because somewhere beneath the applause, beneath the robes, beneath the honors and the smiling faces at every banquet, something in you remains uncertain. Not hesitant, but tired, quietly tired. because you've seen what Rome does to men who try to change it. And you know the climb is only half the story. Chapter 4. War feeds the hungry silence. You leave Rome not in shame, not in defeat, but in calculated retreat. You leave not because you're fleeing, but because you know what it means to give space to ambition. You let the city exhale without you in it. Let others believe you've gone to chase victory, to earn glory, to take what belongs to someone else. And perhaps, in part, you have. But what you're truly chasing is quiet. You take command in Gaul, far from the red-robed senators and whispering doorways of the capital. It is a vast, fractured world, a quilt of wild rivers, damp forests, thick mud roads, and smoke-threaded hills that never quite settle into the neat order Rome prefers. It is not a place of marble. It is a place of movement, of shifting alliances, of breath drawn and held behind the shield. You are now general. But command doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like distance. Every morning begins not with warmth, but with cold air curling beneath your cloak. You rise before the sun, not out of eagerness but necessity. The air is sharp. The frost clings to canvas. The voices around you speak in low tones, shaped more by fatigue than by awe. You learn the rhythm of the camp, the metallic whisper of swords being drawn, the leather thud of boots striking frozen earth. The way soldiers pass their meals in silence, each bite thoughtful, slow. You walk among them often. You do not shout, you ask questions, you listen, you remember names, you let them see your face, not high on a horse but eye level, grounded. You sleep on a cot, no richer than theirs. You eat the same grainy bread, drink the same watered wine, stare at the same fog rolling across the morning hills, and still, you feel apart from them. Because leadership, real leadership, is not closeness. It is a kind of clean separation, not superiority, but solitude. When a man dies under your command, you feel it. You do not weep, you do not flinch, but you carry his name with you until the next one falls. You write it down in quiet ink long after the camp has gone still. And there is always another. Gaul resists, fiercely. Not in grand battles, but in small defiance. A bridge burned in the night, a messenger lost in a ravine. Villagers who smile by firelight and disappear come morning. You come not only as a conqueror, but as an idea. And ideas, they do not always yield to steel. You write home, long flowing letters to the Senate, elegant and careful. You do not lie, but you shape. You paint each engagement with just enough triumph to stir admiration, just enough threat to suggest necessity. You feed them victories like small, fragrant offerings laid at the foot of a nervous god. Back in Rome, they print your words on walls. They recite them in taverns. They pass them through households, one mouth to another. Caesar wins again, they say. Caesar subdues the wilds. And yet, if they were here, in this tent, on this plain, among the mud and fog and blood and brittle frost, they might see something different. Not grandeur, not conquest, just exhaustion and quiet. You begin to draw more in these years. Not for politics, for yourself, in the quietest part of your tent by lamplight. Not maps, not formations, but bodies, limbs, eyes, the softness in a child's face, the sag in an old man's shoulders, the curve of a river from memory. You sketch not as an escape, but as a reminder that the world still exists beyond war, that there are things left that do not ask for control, only observation. Some nights you cannot sleep, not from fear, not exactly, but from accumulation. The weight of names, of decisions, of things seen that cannot be forgotten. The cries of wounded men, the steam rising from red snow, the eyes of those who surrender, and those who do not. You begin to hear silence differently now, not as peace, but as the space that holds everything, the quiet before the charge, the hush between a scream and a breath, the pause when a messenger delivers news and you are still deciding how your face should respond. And there are moments, rare, brief, when you are alone, walking along the edge of a wooded ridge. The stars are sharp above, unfamiliar. Your cloak gathers dew at the hem, and for a moment, you are not general. Not Roman, not even Caesar. You are only a man with cold hands, remembering what it felt like to be small. Still, the campaigns continue. Year after year, victory after victory. You write more letters, Rome listens, Rome begins to shift its gaze. The senators grow wary, your allies grow hungrier, your enemies multiply, not because of what you've done, but because of what they imagine you could do next. You know the distance has served you well, but distance can also become suspicion. So you begin to return, slowly, symbolically, sending men, sending tokens, sending hints. You speak often of dignitas, of the Republic, of your loyalty to the Senate. But even as you say the words, you feel how brittle they've become. Because you've seen something they haven't. You've seen how power works when it's cold, when it sleeps on canvas, when it builds not in votes, but in firewood shared between tents. In the tired eyes of men who will follow you not because they must, but because they believe you are the only one who understands how hard it is to wake up and keep marching. And they are right, because you have felt hunger, you have felt cold, you have felt the weight of command, not as privilege, but as quiet, bone-deep loneliness. And that is what Rome does not see. To them, you are a laurel wreath, a conquering hero, a banner raised against the Gallic wilds. But here, in the silence between battles, in the breath held before dawn, in the glint of the first frost along a blood-stained spear. Here, you are simply a man carrying the weight of victories you no longer celebrate. Because you know, each triumph is also a wound, and each step forward makes turning back just a little harder. Chapter 5. The Rubicon is cold. The map of Italy is familiar now, not just in its cities and roads, but in the rhythms of its names, each one carrying a sound, a memory, a tone of welcome or warning. You trace them slowly in your mind, the way your hand once traced the lines of marble on the floor of your childhood home. Rome, Capua, Ravenna, Brundisium, and then the Rubicon. That thin thread of water, that narrow, nondescript river. Not wide, not deep, but now it stretches before you like the edge of a blade. You stand just before it, late in the day. The sun is low, not quite setting, not quite staying. That in-between hour where light turns everything into gold and shadow. Behind you are your men, loyal, waiting, quiet. They do not question you aloud, but they feel the stillness, the holding of breath, the place where decision becomes history. You've spent years in the north, cold nights, mud, letters inked in flickering lamplight, the weight of command pressing down through snow and silence. You've spent years earning victories, watching legions become loyal not to the Republic, but to you. Not because you demanded it, but because you never asked them to suffer anything you wouldn't endure yourself. And now, Rome is calling you home. But not with open arms. The Senate, that flickering, aging body of tradition and suspicion, has declared that you must surrender your command before you return. Lay down your sword. Return as a private citizen. Trust them. But you know what trust in Rome means. You know what happens to men who walk into power unarmed. You have seen the lists nailed to the forum wall. You have read the histories of those who chose silence and were forgotten. So here you are, standing before the Rubicon, holding the weight of more than your own fate. You could turn back, you could surrender, lay down your cloak, walk into the city with empty hands and a practiced smile. Let them parade you, question you, dissect your victories until they become accusations. You could fade, become a name etched beneath someone else's statue. Or you could step forward, 1 foot, across water, not into glory, but into inevitability. They say later that you spoke, that you whispered, the die is cast, that history bent in that moment. But in truth, you said nothing. Because there are no words for what happens when the world behind you ceases to be safe, and the world ahead of you cannot be known. There is only breath, and a kind of quiet knowing. You step forward. The water is cold, it grips your ankles, seeps through the seams of your boots. The current tugs gently at your legs, not fierce but insistent, like a child pulling a sleeve. You do not stop, you do not look back, Behind you, your men follow. They do not cheer, they do not chant, they walk, because this is not a triumph. This is a reckoning. You camp that night on the southern bank, no different from so many other nights before. A fire is lit, bread is passed, cloaks are drawn tighter around shoulders, but something has shifted in the air. You feel it. They feel it. Not fear exactly, but consequence, as though the sky itself now watches more closely, waiting to see what unfolds. You lie in your tent, but you do not sleep. You listen to the wind. You think of the Tiber, winding through the city you left behind. You think of the Forum, where men who once praised you now raise their voices against you. You think of Pompey, your former ally, your daughter's father-in-law, the man who now stands on the other side of this unfolding civil tier. You do not hate him. That would be easier. No, it is something softer, something sadder, like watching the slow crumbling of a house you once lived in. You remember shared meals, letters exchanged, respect once, but now the city has drawn its lines, and you have crossed one. The days that follow are long and slow, not filled with battle, not yet, but with positioning, with letters sent, with towns opened to you or closed against you. You do not seize Rome in a blaze of blood. You do not raise a flag and declare yourself king. You walk in quietly. The Senate has fled. The streets are watchful but not hostile. You enter not with a roar, but with the sound of sandals on stone. The people watch from behind curtains and doorways. Some nod, some kneel, some look away. There are no horns, no banners, just the rustle of your cloak, the creak of your saddle, and the knowledge that something has changed, not just for you but for Rome. You do not yet know how long this path will be. You do not know the names of the cities you will siege, the lands you will march through, the friends you will lose. You do not yet know the shape of your own end, but you know this: you could not have chosen differently, because the Rubicon was never really a river. It was the moment you realized that to live as a shadow of yourself was no longer enough, that what they feared you might become was already quietly blooming inside your chest. Not ambition exactly, but something quieter, a refusal to be erased. You never meant to undo the Republic. You meant only to not be undone by it. But now you carry the weight of both. And as you ride forward through cities that still smell of ash and incense, through courtyards where olive trees sway beneath a tense sky, you understand that every step you take will echo longer than your lifetime. You are no longer just Caesar. You are consequence. And you will not walk lightly again. Chapter 6. Dictator in a Golden Cage. It doesn't happen all at once. That's the part they rarely say. There's no single sunrise when you wake up and suddenly know you've become the most powerful man in the world. It's slower than that. More fragile, like a thread pulling through silk. Subtle, quiet, not even visible until you look back and realize just how far it's gone. You don't feel like a tyrant. You feel tired. You wear the robe now, the red-trimmed toga. You sit in the gilded chair, not as a consul, not as a general, but as Dictator Perpetuo. That phrase sounds smooth in the mouths of flatterers. Lifelong ruler, eternal stability, a cure for chaos. But you don't quite know what to do with it. The Senate votes to honor you with more statues, more laurels. They rename months. They recite your victories like prayers. In public, your name is everything. In private, your name is a shadow cast over every conversation, even when unspoken. And yet, you still wake before dawn. Not because duty calls you, but because sleep is lighter now. You hear every creak in the marble, every footfall in the hall outside your chamber. You've grown accustomed to the quiet pattern of your guards changing shifts. You know their names. You know the one who coughs too often, the one who keeps his sword too polished, the one who watches you like he's memorizing more than your face. You keep them near, but not too near. And you begin to understand, slowly, gently, that there is a difference between being protected and being watched. The letters still arrive, dozens each day. Pleas, complaints, praises, warnings. You read them slowly with a steady hand. You answer few. You dictate responses with careful phrasing, not because you don't have opinions, but because every sentence now carries more weight than it should. A single word can tilt perception. A small joke can spark suspicion. So you measure your language like a physician measuring dosage, enough to calm, not enough to kill. Your days are no longer yours. They are structured by petitioners, decrees, ceremonies, processions, more marble, more golden wreaths. You smile, you nod, you offer your hand to be kissed, and sometimes just briefly you feel the gaze of someone who doesn't love you. Not hatred exactly, just absence. Their smile too wide. Their eyes not warm. You feel it more and more now. There's no moment of peace, no true solitude. Not even in gardens, not even at meals. Even silence when it comes is loud with the echo of suspicion. And then there's Brutus. He stands by you often now, calm, poised, studied in his manners. He says all the right things, he does all the expected things. You've known him for years. You once held him as a child. You've watched him grow into a man shaped by books and duty and a quiet desire to never let anyone too close. You see yourself in him sometimes, and that may be the problem. He is what Rome used to believe in. And you are what Rome has become. They call you dictator now, yes. But you still attend the Senate. You still speak of reform, of debts forgiven, of colonies, of rights. You still act like one who answers to others, even if those others now mostly bow their heads and wait for your answer first. You try not to change the laws too quickly. You try to keep tradition intact, but tradition, you find, is a slippery thing. It cuts both ways. There is a story told in corners of how you once refused to stand when the Senate approached, how you accepted honors without humility, how you rejected the offer of a crown at the festival, only to seem too practiced in the refusal. And though none of those stories are quite true or quite false, they spread. And you begin to realize, it's not what you've done. It's what they've decided you mean. You feel it in the room when you walk in. The way voices stop just half a second too late. The way the temperature of loyalty flickers in certain faces. The way praise is now almost sharp, overly sweet, like wine that's gone slightly sour. Even your friends seem quieter. Mark Antony, once bold in his admiration, has grown more watchful. Calpurnia, your wife, watches you sleep sometimes, her hand resting on her chest like she's trying to keep something from spilling out. And you continue forward, because what else is there? You didn't ask for this crown, not in the way they think. You didn't dream of tyranny. You dreamed of order, of Rome safe from itself, of a people too often abandoned finally given a voice. You dreamed of marble roads and calendars that made sense, of grain in every bowl and soldiers who could return home with dignity. But the closer you got to those dreams, the farther they pulled from you. And now, the golden chair you sit in feels small, not because it lacks splendor, but because it contains you. Because you are not free. You are surrounded, yes, by guards, by servants, by senators, by scribes, but never by peace. You begin to remember your youth in flashes, the cracked tiles of your boyhood home, your mother's silence, the old scrolls recited under flickering lamps. You think of how quiet that house was, not comfortable, but clear. You knew who you were back then. You were a boy walking carefully through a dangerous city. Now you are a man, walking carefully through a city that pretends to adore you. And yet, despite it all, you do not step down. You cannot. Because power once held is not easily returned. Because even if you wanted to let go, you no longer believe they would let you walk away untouched. Because the republic they say they want back never protected you. Because when you sleep now, light as a feather, ear turned to the breeze through the shutters, you still believe you were trying to fix something. And maybe that belief is the heaviest chain of all. Chapter 7. The Calendar and the Crown. You do not sleep much anymore. Not deeply, not long. Your nights feel stitched together from small, careful pieces. A few hours of half rest, a few minutes of stillness where the sounds of the city soften into something almost gentle, followed by more time lying awake. Your eyes searching the ceiling, not for patterns, but for peace. Sometimes you drift off in the chair by the window, your robe wrapped loosely around you, the scent of old papyrus still clinging to your fingers from unfinished letters. You wake with a start, not from fear exactly, but from the sensation of having been briefly absent in a world that no longer allows your absence. In these quiet hours you think of structure, of lines, of order. You've always been drawn to it, even as a boy. You liked lists, routines, the measured rhythm of verses and calendar days. You liked the feeling of something that stayed in place, perhaps because so little else ever did. So you begin again with time itself. The calendar is a mess. Years slide against years. The months drift with the seasons. The priests add and subtract days like loose change, and no one agrees on when anything actually begins. The whole republic breathes in disarray. You decide to fix it, not to be remembered, not to be praised, just because it should be fixed. You consult astronomers, mathematicians. You listen more than you speak. You stay up late with scrolls spread across your table like a map of the heavens, ink staining your hands and your sleeves. You murmur to yourself as you count days, as you mark equinoxes and festivals, as you try to make time behave again. It is called the Julian calendar when it's done. It will outlive you by centuries. But in the moment, it does not feel grand. It feels simple, clean, quietly correct. And for a moment, Rome seems grateful. They walk by the sun again. They plant at the right season. They celebrate not in confusion, but with clarity. And for a brief flicker in the haze of politics and pageantry, you feel useful. Then comes the crown. Not a real one. Not at first, just the idea of it. It begins as a murmur. A few voices here, a few shadows cast in jest. They say it casually like a joke tossed over wine. Should Caesar be king? They watch your eyes when they say it. They're always watching your eyes. You refuse, you say it plainly, over and over again. I am no king. I am the servant of the republic. But the rumor walks faster than your denial. It slips between pillars, behind drapes, into the mouths of those who long for old forms of power. Not because they admire monarchy, but because they miss the illusion of certainty. You keep working. You expand citizenship to those long ignored. You relieve debts. You commission public works to feed the poor, not through charity, but through pride. Work given in exchange for dignity. You try to make Rome better, not for legacy, but for balance, for restoration, for fairness. And yet, with every decree, every reform, the whispers grow. You begin to notice it more clearly now, the distance in the Senate, the polite, frozen smiles, the way they speak to you, the way one speaks to a god in a temple, with reverence, yes, but never warmth. You host a festival, a public event. There is laughter, music, ceremony. A crown is brought forth, placed in Antony's hand, and in front of the people, Antony offers it to you. You push it away, the people cheer. You wave your hand, the performance is over. But you feel something strange in that moment, something colder than the metal ever could have been. You feel the air shift. Some thought you would take it, others hoped you wouldn't. Now no one is satisfied. Because sometimes, refusal itself can be a kind of betrayal. You begin to see your reflection differently. Not in the bronze mirrors, but in the people. The way they look at you. The way they lean in when you speak or lean away when you approach. You are no longer a man, not to them. You are a question, a fear, a line that might be crossed. You find yourself withdrawing, not by choice, but by erosion. Dinners are quieter now, friends are fewer. You keep company with scrolls, not senators. You trust only a handful, and even then, not entirely. You still pass laws, still speak, still lead. But the city does not hum with hope anymore. It pulses with uncertainty, with tension, and beneath it all, something else. You think often now of Brutus. He still stands near, still offers advice, still watches the floor when you speak in private. You remember when he was younger, his eyes brighter, his voice more certain. He once spoke of Rome the way one speaks of a mother. Now his words are fewer, sharper, folded in caution. You wonder if he pities you, or fears what you might become. And you no longer ask the question you once did. Will they love me? Now you ask something else. Can I still live without them needing to? You walk through your gardens in the late afternoon, a cloak draped loosely over your shoulders, the wind light, the sky soft orange. The lemon trees are just beginning to bloom again. A servant nods from a distance, not speaking. You walk slowly, hands behind your back, your footsteps soft on the gravel path. And you think, this city is quieter than it used to be. Or perhaps it's just me. Perhaps the silence has grown louder the higher I've climbed. And so you return inside. You sit at your desk. You unroll another scroll. You write a law that will be debated. You draft a letter you will never send. You dip the stylus again, and you try, gently, endlessly, to build a world that will not fall in on itself, even as you feel that it already has. Chapter 8. The Eyides whisper louder. Now there's a particular kind of silence that only comes in the days before something ends, not an absence of sound. Rome is never fully quiet, but a hush that feels deeper than noise, like the sky holding its breath. You feel it first in the forum, not during speeches, but in the pauses between applause. You hear it in the way men clear their throats before they agree with you. You notice it in the weight of greetings that linger just a second too long, like a question left unanswered. You are not surprised by it. No, it is more familiar than you'd like to admit. The Ides of March are approaching. You know the calendar better than anyone now. You helped reshape it, gave order to time itself. And so the dates move toward you not in confusion, but in perfect clarity, like footsteps echoing on marble, approaching slowly, steadily, unhurried. You rise earlier each morning now, not from worry, but from habit. There is a stillness in these hours before the city wakes. You sit near the window of your chamber, the fabric of your robe draped loosely around you, a cup of warm wine in your hand. The lamps are still lit, but the sky is just beginning to change. That soft pre-dawn color, neither gold nor gray, just beginning. Sometimes Calpurnia stirs in the bed behind you. Sometimes she does not. She dreams now. And the dreams disturb her. She speaks of broken statues, of red rivers, of you, lying still and cold. She reaches for your hand at night and finds only the echo of your warmth. You tell her not to worry. You press her hand in yours and murmur gently, as if that alone might soften the future. But her eyes stay wide even after the candle is extinguished. You feel her breath slow beside you, but the air between you remains tense, like a string pulled tight and hidden beneath soft linens. And still, you do not change course. You do not cancel the meetings. You do not avoid the Senate. You do not demand extra guards or cloaks or omens read in triplicate. You are not reckless, but you are also no longer afraid, because fear by now would be redundant. You've already lost too much to it. The city still calls you Caesar, with admiration, with awe, sometimes with edge. Children play games using your name. Bakers shape your profile into loaves of bread. Poets place your victories into verses. And still, you walk with the sense that your body has become a statue long before your spirit is ready to stop moving. Your friends visit you less often now, not because they no longer admire you, but because they no longer know what to say. The conversations are polite. They smile. They sit stiffly. They mention old times too often. And when they stand to leave, their hands linger on your shoulder a little longer than they used to, not out of affection, but perhaps out of farewell. And then there's Brutus. He still comes, still listens, still nods when you speak. But his eyes are different now. Not angry, not cold, just farther away. You try to remember when the change began. Was it the first time your name was shouted in the streets louder than his ancestors? Was it the first law you passed that bypassed the old processes? Or was it just the slow, inevitable way that history decides which sons will be remembered and which will be standing in the wrong room at the wrong moment? You think of him often, even more than you think of your enemies. Because enemies are easy. They announce themselves. They hiss, they conspire, they show their teeth. But Brutus, he prays beside you. He touches your hand when you speak in sorrow. He thanks you for everything you've done. And in that kindness, you feel the weight of what must come. The night before the Eyides, Calpurnia weeps. You have not seen her cry since the early years, when the losses were still fresh and private. But now, her tears return not as weakness but as some final offering, as though if she leaves them at your feet, they might soften your path. She begs you not to go. She tells you she's had another dream, more vivid, more certain. She says she saw the Senate drenched in blood. She says she saw your statue shattered, your body pierced again and again by men with no faces. You listen. You hold her hands between yours. You press your forehead to hers. You close your eyes and breathe deeply, not to calm yourself, but to remember the feeling of breath before everything is taken from you. And still, in the morning, you rise. The sun is gentle, the sky soft. The wind moves through the curtains like a whisper. A servant enters, then another. They dress you carefully. The folds of your toga fall heavy over your shoulder. You smell the oil on your wrists, the faint scent of cypress. Antony is late. You wait a while. You consider the omens, the priests, the murmurs from the courtyard. Then you stand. The streets greet you like they always have. With bowed heads, with silent stares, with eyes that say too much and mouths that stay shut. You walk not like a king, not like a god, but like a man who has decided long ago not to run from the end. The steps of the Senate feel longer than usual. The columns are cool beneath your hand. The marble echoes beneath your feet. You think of your youth, of your father's voice, of your mother's steady eyes, of the lessons that said Rome was eternal and that the gods reward those who serve. And then you enter. You do not see the knives at first, you only see familiar faces. And that somehow is worse. Because when the pain comes, when the hands reach for you, when the sharpness pierces cloth and skin and memory, you don't feel betrayal. You feel recognition. It was always going to be them. You do not cry out, you do not fall easily, but you fall. And in that moment, whether myth or memory, you see Brutus. And though the world is blurring, though your vision narrows, you find yourself asking not why, but simply of course. Chapter 9, March 15th, 44 B.CE. It is the Ides of March, and you wake before the sun. Not because a storm rattles the windows or a dream pulls you back from sleep. You wake because your body does what it always does now. It stirs before the light, before the sounds of servants gathering water, before the city clears its throat. You lie still for a few moments, breathing in the dimness, listening to the gentle creak of old wood as the wind brushes the shutters. The air is cool, not cold. The kind of morning where winter hasn't fully left, but spring has begun to announce itself, not with flowers, but with the feeling that something is beginning to change. You sense it. The air has weight. Not dread, just presence. You sit up slowly, your robe already draped nearby. You are not a young man anymore. You feel it in your knees, in the way your breath takes an extra second to settle. But you are still strong, still Caesar. Still the figure that holds this city together, whether the city wants to admit it or not. Calpurnia is already awake. She sits near the window, turned slightly away, a shawl drawn close around her. Her hair is unpinned. Her eyes are distant. She does not greet you at first, and that silence says more than words ever could. You cross the room and rest your hand lightly on her shoulder. She flinches, not in fear, but as though your presence has interrupted something she wasn't ready to leave behind. A dream, maybe, or a prayer. I dreamed again, she says quietly. Her voice is softer than usual, less certain. You bled in the forum, your statue crumbled in my hands. You let the words settle in the space between you. You do not mock her. You do not reassure her either. You simply listen, as you've learned to do in these final years. Not to respond, but to witness. Because witnessing matters. Especially when silence is all you have left to give. The room is quiet. Beyond the shutters, the city begins to stir. Fate wheels against stone, a market bell in the distance, a bird calling out from the roof above. I want you to stay, she says. You place your hand gently over hers. I know, you reply, and you mean it. You know she wants it. You know you could. But you also know that the weight of what you carry cannot be paused. Not by dreams, not by love. You eat little this morning. Just a piece of bread, torn by hand, and a cup of cool water. You feel strangely unburdened. Not peaceful, not quite, but quiet. The kind of quiet that comes not from calm, but from knowing there is nothing left to delay. There are things left unfinished, reforms, buildings, letters to provincial governors. There are names you've written in margins that will never be circled again. There are people you meant to thank, and some you meant to forgive. But the list is long, and time is not generous. Still you dress as always. You allow the servant to help you into the folds of your toga. You wear the laurel crown, the one gifted for past victories, though it feels heavier this morning. The fabric scratches at your collar, but you do not adjust it. These are small discomforts, temporary things. The light in the atrium is gold now, real gold. The sun has risen. You feel it warm against your cheek as you pause beneath the columns. You look up, not for signs, not for omens, but simply to remember what the sky looks like on a morning like this. Antony was meant to meet you. He is late. Some say he is being held back, delayed by design. You do not rush to find out. You walk to the Senate anyway without guards, without ceremony, just with your steps, slow, sure, measured. The streets feel familiar today, not celebratory, not hostile, just watchful. You see faces, but you do not count them. You hear whispers, but none directed to your ears. You nod to those who acknowledge you. You breathe through your nose, deeply grounding yourself in this strange stillness, the one that lies between routine and change. When you reach the theater of Pompey, you pause for a moment outside. This place, this borrowed Senate house, holds a strange kind of memory. It was built by another great man, another name carved into the city. You think briefly of the long line of men who've tried to shape Rome, who've tried to keep it from splintering apart. You step inside. The light is dimmer here, cooler. The stone floor echoes beneath your sandals. The room is filled but not crowded. Dozens of senators already gathered. Faces you know, eyes you have met across the chamber for years. They rise as you enter. Some smile, some do not. You walk slowly toward your chair. You do not notice the dagger in the hand of the man closest to you. Not yet. You do not hear the whispers that passed through these marble halls the night before. You only hear the sound of your own breathing. And then, pain. First, small. A puncture. You turn, but there is no one to stop. Another strike. And then another. Hands grab at your robe. Others press in. You reach out, not in defense, but in disbelief. You hear a name. Brutus. His eyes are not cold. They are unreadable. And that is worse. You do not speak grandly. You do not curse. You do not weep. Perhaps you say nothing. Perhaps your last breath is not a word, but a letting go. You fall, not slowly, not violently, just inevitably. The floor is cold. The air smells of oil and old parchment. You see the ceiling above you, the painted figures looking down, gods you no longer pray to, history you no longer belong to. And then, nothing. Chapter 10. Statues cannot sleep. There is no breath now, no warmth left in your chest. You are no longer awake in the way the living are awake, tied to muscle and hunger, shaped by the rhythm of bone. And yet you are not quite gone either. Something remains, something unmoored from the calendar you once straightened, from the map you once carried, from the city that once knelt at your name. It's quiet now, not silent, but quieter than Rome has been in centuries. The crowd outside the Senate has already scattered. the ones who cheered your victories, who pressed forward to touch the hem of your toga, who called for bread and games. They are elsewhere now, watching, whispering, rewriting what they just saw. They will say you died with dignity. They will say you saw it coming. They will say many things, because the dead don't speak, and so the living speak for them. You are laid upon stone, your body cold, your robes soaked, not in triumph, but in the color that cannot be erased from marble. The hands that once reached to crown you now fumble, unsure what to do. Those who feared your name now fear the silence your absence has left behind. And you do not see them, not in the way you used to, but you feel the shift, the beginning of distance, of transformation. They begin to shape you now, with words, with grief, with ambition. Even before your funeral, even before your ashes cool, they start to sculpt the version of you they need most. Some say you were a tyrant. Some say you were the last true Roman. Some say you never should have crossed the Rubicon. Some say no one else could have done what you did. You drift through it all, not as ghost, not as God, but as memory. You feel yourself being carved. The first statue goes up quickly, bronze, cast from the melted spoils of your Gallic campaigns. They place it at the edge of the forum, near the place you fell, as though bronze might soothe what blood has marked. The face is strong, too strong perhaps. The brow is furrowed in noble worry. The eyes don't look like yours, they look farther, beyond. You don't speak as they sculpt you. You couldn't even if you wanted to. Statues cannot sleep, but they also cannot scream. And that is where you remain, in 1,000 forms. Your face cast in stone and shadow, in oil paintings and mosaic tiles, in gold coins slipped into pockets by emperors who claimed your blood, your name, your favor. They carry you into centuries you never asked to see. You are used by those who crown themselves. You are quoted by those who rebel. You are turned into a lesson, then into a warning, then into a mirror, polished so carefully that no one can see the cracks beneath. You watch the Republic fall, years after you did. You watch it call itself an empire and smile through gritted teeth. You watch emperors rise on your name, fall beneath it. You watch men place laurel crowns on their own brows, hoping the world will remember them the way it remembered you. But remembrance is not kindness. Remembrance is weight, and the weight of memory cannot be slept through. They speak of your reforms, the calendar, the roads, the debt forgiveness, the laws written not for the Senate but for the farmer with tired hands, for the soldier who had no home. And yet they also speak of your ambition, of your refusal to step aside, of the crown offered and declined, until even your no began to sound like a yes. You are praised and punished in equal measure, because power once held never dies completely. It lingers, and you held more than most. In time, your bones are dust, but your shape remains, not the shape of your body, but the shape of your story. It is retold in marble, in ink, in whispered arguments beneath frescoed ceilings. Julius Caesar, the name becomes a title. Caesar, in another tongue, becomes Kaiser, becomes Tsar, becomes throne. And no matter how far they stretch from Rome, your name arrives first. Your name precedes you. It always did. You feel the centuries pass like slow breaths. You feel the weight of each statue erected, each one a little more exaggerated than the last. The nose longer, the robes heavier, the pedestal taller. But none of them know the boy you once were. The one who read by lamplight, who listened at doors, who dreamed not of conquest, but of being seen. They do not remember how tired you were some nights, how lonely it was, even with gold in your hands. How many times you almost turned away, how much quieter you were in your heart than they imagined. Because that is the truth of it. What you built was not a monument, it was a conversation. And now that you are gone, only one voice remains. Theirs. You want to tell them that you were never trying to become godlike. You were only trying to make the world a little clearer, to bring order to chaos, to hold the city steady just a little longer, to carry what was crumbling, even if your own shoulders buckled beneath it. But statues don't speak, and history has no ears, only pens. You begin to fade, not from memory but from detail. The statues remain, the name remains, but the hand that once trembled before each decree? Forgotten. The days when you hesitated? Erased. The love you gave to people who could never return it? Footnotes. You become a marble pose, a series of sharp lines, a symbol to be used, a cautionary tale, a claim to legitimacy for those who want power but not the burden that came with yours. And yet, in the quietest corners of the city, you are still felt, in the way the calendar turns, in the way the city breathes beneath aqueducts you helped restore, in the curve of a road that leads outward from Rome and still bears your name. A boy passes by one of your statues. He is young. He does not know you. But he stops. He looks up, and for a moment he sees not the emperor, not the general, not the dictator. He sees the shape of something larger than himself, not because of greatness, but because of the stillness. He stands there silent, and perhaps for just a moment you feel what it might have been like to rest. Because even if statues cannot sleep, they can still be seen, and perhaps that is enough.